What a difference a day makes, and the people in this country are euphoric. I hope you got to see the inauguration. President Trump started the morning at 5 o'clock, and when I fell asleep at 10 o'clock that night, last night, Trump was still going. And the crowds were absolutely so optimistic and so excited everywhere he went, including the crowd in the rotunda for the inauguration, Republicans and many Democrats alike. Well, I was really worried about the president's safety. So when they said they were moving the inauguration inside the rotunda of the Capitol, I did breathe a sigh of relief, and I heard a lot of other people express a similar sentiment. But as it turned out, the day was basically flawless, except for the frigid cold temperatures, and even those moderated a little bit. The inauguration took place exactly on time, and at 12 o'clock, the 47th president of the United States was the new president. And as promised, President Trump issued a series of executive orders. He wasted no time in going straight to work. First of all, he rolled back 78 Biden executive orders. He issued an executive order to secure the border, and in doing so, also declared the southern border a state of emergency. The significance of that, he can now involve the military in helping secure the southern border. Yesterday afternoon, tragically, an ICE agent was murdered in the Northeast. So while most of the focus has been on the Mexican border, the Northeast, the northern border, is also a great concern. One of the executive orders that President Trump issued was that the death penalty could be imposed for any illegal alien who murders a police officer or agent of the federal government. I don't know the timing of the murder that occurred. I believe it was in Connecticut, and President Trump's issuance of the order invoking the death penalty. But regardless, the unfortunate tragedy certainly will galvanize people around support for imposing the death penalty in such cases. Now, for those who say that Elon Musk is unduly influencing the president, I guess they have some explaining to do when it comes to why the president removed the EV credits through executive order. So Biden imposed tax credits for anyone who would buy an electric vehicle. The credits could range up to as much as $7,500. Well, the market today has not reacted very favorably to that. Tesla stock is now down, at the time of this broadcast, almost $12 per share, which is about 3%, I believe. So you would think that if President Trump was going to reward his largest funder, that he would not have removed the tax credit. But obviously, Musk does not have as much influence as some people charge, or does he? You see, I think that a lot of people have really missed a point here. My personal belief is that Trump got rid of the tax credits because he felt that they were fundamentally wrong, that the taxpayers of this country should not be subsidizing the purchase of a luxury vehicle by people who can afford it. So the market today is punishing Tesla because the tax credit is gone. And of course, Tesla is the largest provider of electric vehicles in the United States. And so that must have been designed to hurt Musk. Well, the fact of the matter is, my own belief is that it was a policy decision and that personality and politics did not play into his decision. But in a very surprising, maybe not recognized sort of way, if there was a benefit, it actually probably is to benefit Tesla. Their gross profit on a car is somewhere between 15 and 18%, depending on the model. Meanwhile, every time Ford Motor Company sells an electric car, they lose $50,000. They have a negative gross profit on electric cars. GM has to have the tax credits as well in order to be able to make the transition to electric vehicles. So what does removal of the tax credits do? It really hurts Tesla's competition and really helps them, unintended perhaps sort of way, because they don't need the tax credit. They're profitable without it. Even Ford and GM's internal combustion engine cars only earn about 5% in gross profit. That means Tesla is already 3 times more profitable with their automobiles before the tax credits even come into the picture. So a counterintuitive result is that Tesla benefits from canceling the tax credits while the big three suffer. That's the way I see it. So maybe the market will understand it, and Tesla stock can now go back up. I would like that because I have a fair amount of Tesla stock. President Trump also declared declared members of the cartels as international terrorists. Again, what does that mean? It means we can use the military to go after them. Now, the question remains whether President Trump, as the commander-in-chief, will allow or order our military to go inside the sovereign territory of Mexico to go after the cartels. My own belief is that he will not unless Mexico does not act. And so far, Mexico has turned a blind eye to the cartels. They've turned a blind eye to illegals coming through Mexico to then enter at our southern border. So I think the party's over. I think that Trump is, in effect, telling Mexico, you got to get involved. You've got to stop. You've got to police your own state. And if you don't, we will. So stay tuned. It will be very interesting to see what happens. I guess one of my favorite decisions that Trump made yesterday was to remove the security clearances for all 51 members of the intelligence community who signed that letter saying that the Hunter Biden laptop smacked of Russian disinformation when they knew. And we now know that they knew with 100% certainty that that laptop was authentic. There was no Russian fingerprints on that laptop at all. So they just lied. And Trump, now the new commander-in-chief, revokes their security clearances. In other words, no more daily briefings for these self-righteous, self-important security members of the intel community, including Clapper and Brennan, who have been particularly vitriolic towards Trump. As promised, last night at about 8 o'clock, maybe 8:30, President Trump signed an executive order pardoning all 1,500 January the 6th hostages, as he refers to them. The amount of harm that Nancy Pelosi and the Jan 6 Commission did to these 1,500 people is not, you cannot estimate it. The psychological harm, the financial harm, the reputational harm is, it is shocking beyond belief that a leader in this country could go to such lengths and recklessly ruin the lives of 1,500 people. Now, they know they've lied. They know they made it up. The January 6th insurrection, as they've tried to label it, was not an insurrection. President Trump was never even charged with creating or participating in an insurrection. It was a riot at best, or at worst, rather. But my belief, shared by many people, is that it was a staged event, that there were provocateurs inside the Capitol. We can start with Ray Epps. We need to look very closely into the Capitol Hill police officer who shot and killed Ashley Babbitt. I want justice for Ashley Babbitt. Michael Byrd is his name. But what happened? What happened at roughly 11:30 yesterday morning? Joseph Biden, the illegitimate president, on his way out of office, just as he came into office with a lie, he left office with a lie, and he granted presidential pardons to 6 of his family members, including his brother Jim Biden, and all of the members of the January 6th committee and their staffers, along with a host of other people. It is the most reckless act. It is totally consistent with him imposing a 2-tiered justice system. Most of America realizes that January 6th was a cooked deal, that Nancy Pelosi and God knows who else choreographed that to give cover for the illegitimate 46th president as he was taking office, so they could blame Trump, and it was a 2-prong approach to prevent Trump from ever being able to run for president again. Well, it's all backfired, and it's going to backfire more. Liz Cheney, off the hook. Adam Kinzinger, off the hook. Adam Shifty Schiff, off the hook. So here's what we need to do, Mr. President. We need to indict these people. Well, no, that's not, I got the order wrong. We need to investigate these people, make a referral to the FBI, and have all of these people investigated. Send out the best FBI agents we've got who are unbiased and conduct an investigation into the Joe Biden crime family and into the January 6th members of the committee. Start putting people under oath. I would start with Cassidy Hutchinson. Remember her? She's the gal who said President Trump reached over the shoulder of the Secret Service agent driving the Beast after his speech on the ellipse and ordered him to take him to the Capitol. And when he refused, President Trump grabbed the wheel. Well, that's funny because 3 Secret Service agents who were inside the automobile reported that no such thing happened. So Cassidy Hutchinson just lied. Pull her into an interview and ask her who she collaborated with, colluded with, to concoct that story. My suspicions are that it's going to point right back to Liz Cheney, because we know factually, because we've got the text, that Liz Cheney contacted this young lady. She's 24 years old. She was Mark Meadows' assistant, Cassidy Hutchinson, and coached her on what to say to the January 6th Commission. Now, to my knowledge, she was not pardoned. So if she lies to the FBI, she can go straight to jail. Do not collect $500. Do not pass go. Straight to jail. I think she'll tell the truth. What do you think? Let me know in the comments. But then we need to do the same thing with every single person who touched that committee. Then we need to bring indictments based on the evidence. Then we need to conduct a trial with a prosecutor. And if they choose to put up a defense, that's their privilege. And then we'll have a jury make a finding. Now, it's a lot of effort for basically naught, you might say. Biden would say. Pelosi will say. Schiff will say. What are they doing? You can't send them to jail because they're pardoned. Well, let's think about that. They're pardoned as of the pardon, but they're not pardoned for things that they do after the pardon. So if the FBI comes calling and they lie to the FBI, that is against the law. If you bring them before a grand jury and put them under oath to testify and they lie, that's called perjury. The pardons don't include that. That's what Martha Stewart went to jail for. That's what Leona Helmsley went to jail for, not the underlying crime. But look, I really am not trying to send those people to jail, although it would not displease me. But I don't want the damage to the country to occur just so we can get even. But getting even is part of the criminal justice system. It's called retribution, and that is one of the reasons that you have a trial and send people to jail. It is also a deterrent, and that's what I'm after. I want the truth, and I want a deterrent so that it never happens again. And these people need to exit the stage in disgrace. And I predict that that is exactly what is going to happen. And that's the truth. And I'm John Gordon. Let the golden age begin. Today it's my pleasure to welcome Jared Knott to The Truth. He is an author. He's authored 2 books. One is Tiny Blunders, Big Disasters. And then his second work is 39 Tiny Mistakes That Changed the World Forever. Interesting stuff, Jared. Welcome to The Truth.
Well, thank you very much. The truth is a good thing.
So if you had to pick one tiny blunder that had the biggest disaster as a consequence, what would it be?
Well, there's so many, but when you ask the question, the one that comes to mind was one of the biggest events in history, and that was Christopher Columbus's, of course, discovery of the New World for Europeans at that time. And it was ended up being a magnificent mistake that had glorious results, but at the same time had enormously painful consequences. I'll explain what I mean.
Tell us the story.
Yes. Now, scholars had known for a long time that the world was round, even way back in the time of Aristotle, when they would have an eclipse of the Earth's shadow over the moon, they could see that it was round in shape. So for a long time, they knew the world was round. And then Aristophanes, a gentleman at the Great Library at Alexandria, was able to figure out not only that the world was round, but the approximate size of the Earth with amazing accuracy. He had a report up in Alexandria from what is now called Anwar, down farther to the south, that they said on the longest day of the year, a stick in the ground cast no shadow, and the sun would hit the bottom of a well without touching the sides. Whereas where he was, farther to the north in Alexandria, on that same day, the stick in the ground had a very definite shadow, and also the sun would hit the side of the well before going to the bottom. So he decided that, of course, that must mean that there was a curve to the Earth, and he had somebody pace off the distance between Alexandria and Anwar and did the calculus and was able to determine the curve of the Earth, and from that, the approximate size of the Earth way back 200 some odd years before Christ. So educated people knew the world was round and its approximate size. However, here's what happened. There was also a man, Marius the Tyre, who did calculations, and he calculated that the Earth was actually much smaller than it really was, number one. And number two, when Christopher Columbus was looking at his numbers, he made the mistake of using an Italian mile instead of an Arabic mile. So he compounded the mistake. And so Christopher Columbus thought that the world was only about 75% as big as it really was. Well, he deduced that the Canary Islands were only about 2,200 miles from Japan. Japan was known to exist, but it was only 2,200 miles away, and they were desperate to get the spices from the Spice Islands. When the fall of Constantinople took place, the Ottoman Empire closed down the Silk Road, and so there's no way to get spices to Europeans. So they thought, well, let's sail directly west. It's only 2,200 miles. We'll sail over there to the Spice Islands, get all these spices, sail back, and it'll be a bonanza for us. Of course, the problem was that he had miscalculated on top of a miscalculation, and it was like 10,200 miles from the Canary Islands all the way over to Asia. Plus, we had the North and South American continent in the way. So anyway, he went to England, tried to persuade them, let me have some ships to sail west. No, you're all wrong, Columbus. Went to France. No, you're all wrong, Columbus. Went to Spain. No, Portugal. No, you're all wrong, Columbus. But then he went to the Italians, and Queen, it was King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella. Queen Isabella, it was not a romantic thing, but she took a liking to Christopher Columbus, and she had talked to her husband, the king. Okay, we're going to give you 3 small ships, the Ina, the Pina, and the Santa Maria, and let you sail west and see if you can make it to the Spice Islands. Okay. Well, all right. So there was this magnificent mistake. He was off by 8,000 plus miles. So, and the crew, by the way, didn't want to go. They were assigned to this mission. They didn't really want to be there. And so they sabotaged the rudder on one of the ships. but they're able to fix it. And so off they go, sailing to the west. And after 3 or 4 weeks, there was close to mutiny. Okay, they said, we're out here in the middle of nowhere, the ocean. We can't see the landing place. We're all going to die out here. So I'll tell you what, give me 3 more days. Give me 3 more days. We don't see land in 3 days. I will turn around and I will sail back. Well, luckily, 3 days there, they saw light. Okay, and then they get close to the light. It turns out this land, and it's in the Bahamas. And so they land there. They come ashore. They claim this land in the name of the King and Queen of Spain. Well, so far so good. It's a tiny mistake, but it led to a beautiful, wonderful result, right? Oh, and of course, the United States of America and the whole new world came as a result of it. Well, not so fast. Okay, yes, all that's true, but there was also a horrible, ugly underside. The Europeans brought with them measles, smallpox, whooping cough, malaria, these terrible diseases.
Oh.
The people in the New World had no immunity in their system to these diseases. And so there was just devastation, hundreds of thousands of people dying in just a matter of months. 3 years after Columbus landed, 90% of the population of the Bahamas had been completely wiped out. And as the Europeans spread across the New World into North America and so on, they brought with them these horrible diseases and hundreds of thousands of millions of dying as a result of smallpox in particular, as well as measles and the others. And then, so it was a terrible disaster for them. And then for their part, the new people in the New World gave syphilis to the sailors, Columbus's sailors. They took syphilis back with them to Europe. One estimate is within 20 years, 15% of the population had syphilis, which is can be fatal, but it's also a horribly disfiguring disease. It also can cause insanity. It causes enormous pain. So we had the glorious discovery of the New World and all the good things that have come from that. We also had hundreds of thousands, even millions of people, primarily people from the New World, dying of disease, and of course the syphilis being spread to Europe. So it was both a great blessing and a horrible, horrible, miserable curse, all based on a tiny mistake, which of course Christopher Columbus' miscalculation. Of course, it was just a matter of time before Europe discovered the New World, but it was a horrible thing when it did happen.
What a fascinating story. So are you, Jared, an historian? How did you acquire all this knowledge?
Yeah, I'm a history buff. And I think you start digging into something, and the internet has been a huge blessing because it's just this world library at your fingertips. And you can go into a subject like that. There's 5, 6, 7, 10 articles you can find in just a matter of minutes on any subject that you name. So that's been a huge blessing.
So refresh my memory. When Christopher Columbus, on his first mission, landed in the Bahamas, did he return to Spain after that, or did he push forward to America, or did he even know that America was maybe 50 or 100 miles further west?
Yes, he never made it to the mainland, and he made 4 voyages. He took a lot of captives back with him and brought them back to Europe, most of whom died from results of diseases. And he never did admit that he made a mistake till the end of his life. He maintained that no, he had landed in India, and these people were Indians, which of course they were not. And the North and South America might have been named for him if he had seen the truth in time, but it was not. So it's named after Amerigo Vespucci, another navigator who was saying that these are a separate continent altogether.
Amazing. So bring us forward. What are some of the tiny mistakes, tiny blunders that have brought big disasters or impact in the modern era?
Yes, in October the 7th, took place primarily because of a major lapse on the part of the Israeli intelligence system. The Mossad and the other intelligence divisions they have there in Israel have this storied record of being extremely accomplished, very reliable, the best of the world. And maybe they were suffering from a kind of victory disease or overconfidence because there were signals and information coming to them. The president of Egypt says that 3 days before the October 7th attack, he had warned the Netanyahu government that something big like that was going to happen. There was also other indications. They saw people practicing with those hang gliders, et cetera. And there were other indications, all of which got ignored. And there was Mossad's low point in their long, very successful history. This was a low point. They just missed it altogether. It was a complete and total surprise. It took them completely unawares, and of course the disaster took place. Well, that's led, if they had been preemptive and gone in and attacked the Hamas a day or two or three before the attack, took the fight to them, and they could have had a spoiler attack. They could have neutralized the attack. The whole thing could have been greatly reduced, not taken place at all. As it was, they missed it completely. The horrible atrocities take place. Israel says, okay, you want this war? We're going to get this war. They've defeated Hamas. They defeated Hezbollah in the north. They defeated Iran that tried to attack them with rockets. Okay, they've won. But it would have been better if the war had never taken place in the first place. If they had not been so asleep at the switch, it would not have.
So is November 22nd, 1963 on your list? JFK's assassination?
No, that, by the way, I have a third book coming out, which is not going to be out for another year or so. And it's the title of that book is The Hushed Up Murders of Famous People. They murdered big and got away with it. And there is serious evidence, and I can't say it's true, but there's serious evidence. And Robert Kennedy Jr. and Tucker Carlson believe in this, that the CIA was involved in the murder of John Kennedy, which is just shocking to believe that could be true. The CIA has admitted having a relationship with Lee Harvey Oswald. And there was a lot of indications that, in fact, they may have been involved in the assassination, shocking as it is. So that's not so much as a tiny mistake as it is a horrible conspiracy. I'm not saying it's true. There's serious evidence to indicate that it may be true, and it's, of course, totally shocking.
Our listeners know we this is a subject that we have spent an inordinate amount of time on The Truth, and we've had many authors on The Truth that have talked about it. The first one was David Talbot. It was actually our very first broadcast. He wrote a book called The Devil's Triangle, and he lays it out in 850 pages exactly how Allen Dulles and the CIA orchestrated and conducted the assassination, and then Hoover and Johnson and a host of others, including a complicit media, spent the next 60 years covering it up. Even the mainstream media to this day, in spite of a mountain of evidence that Lee Harvey Oswald did not even pull a trigger, let alone the trigger of the fatal shot, there's ample evidence to support that Oswald was not even in the sniper's nest, but instead in the break room of the school book depository, where he was seen sipping on a Coca-Cola 5 minutes before the assassination, and then again 10 minutes after, when a police officer and the manager of the school book depository rushed in on their way to the sniper's nest. The cop said, "Who is that?" And the manager said, "Oh, he works here." And they went on up. Oswald, when he was arrested, said, "I'm just a patsy." And so we could spend another hour on that. Our listeners are like, "Oh, John, no, please, not again. Let's keep it moving." So give us some more, Jared, of things that you think in our lifetime that have been tiny blunders with big consequences.
Yes, you go back to the 2000 election, and there was the teaser for it is a single document, designed by one single clerk in one single county, changed the outcome of the 2000 election and led directly to a major war. A nice lady, I won't say her name, but she was designing what is called the butterfly ballot. It's a ballot with a list of names on the left and the right, and a series of punch holes in the center. It was very confusing the way it was designed. And the number 2 name on the left page was Al Gore, but it was the number 3 punch hole. The number 2 punch hole belonged to Pat Buchanan on the right page. People got confused and they punched the punch hole for Pat Buchanan, but they meant to be punching the punch hole for Al Gore. In the other surrounding counties, Pat Buchanan got maybe 150 votes per county. In this particular county, gets 3,000, 4,000, 5,000, like 3,600 votes, something like that. Some people punched both punch holes, which had validated the ballot. About 5,000 or 6,000 were validated. So Al Gore ended up losing that county by like 460 votes. He would have most probably won it by 3, 4, 5,000 votes. He would have won Florida. He would have won the election. He was adamantly opposed to the war in Iraq against Saddam Hussein. And so the whole thing would not have taken place. We had this nice lady, what's her name, very nice, intelligent lady. I had her on one of the morning talk shows back in the early 2000s. They said to her, people are saying that you're the one responsible for this war because of this poorly designed ballot. She was in tears. Yes, ma'am, we appreciate the fact that you're crying, but we have 50,000 dead people and $2 trillion down the drain, all because of a single tiny mistake. Of course, that's just one pivotal mistake. George Bush would have to take responsibility for the war and other people too.
Fascinating story. I remember that election very well, and the hanging chabs and the guy with the thick glasses and microscope trying to figure out who the elector intended to vote for. And so anything in the last 5 or 10 years that sticks out for you?
Let's see, of course, the October 7th and the 2000 election, but then we go back there into the 20th century. There's some significant mistakes there. The Watergate, it was interesting what happened there. The teaser there is a single piece of tape rotated several inches the wrong direction, changed the outcome of the Vietnam War. The United States might very well have won, except for the single tiny mistake. It had to do with the Watergate break-in. When they were jimmying the lock from the parking garage into the office building, they were told to pull the strike from the door down with a single piece of tape in the vertical position. They made a mistake and they put it in the horizontal position so that you see the tape across the door face. So as the night watchman, Frank Wills, is walking down the hallway, oops, what's this? We got tape on the door. He calls the Washington, D.C. police. I think he had to call them twice. They call the uniformed officer on duty in that section of the city to go with it to Watergate and check it out. But there's a strong rumor indicating that he was intoxicated in a local bar and could not respond to the call. So they had to send the bum patrol, 3 officers dressed as hobos in a jalopy car. They pull up to the Watergate. They're not recognized as police officers. They come in and they arrest James Ford. Watergate begins. Boom, 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 the scandal. And Henry Kissinger gave a television interview. He said the plan was to go in and bomb the living daylights out of North Vietnamese who were violating the treaty. They were so weak politically they couldn't. So South Vietnam collapses, Nixon administration collapses. It all falls apart because of a single piece of tape rotated several inches the wrong direction and a drunk cop.
Absolutely fascinating. So you've got another book that you're working on, Hushed Up Murders of Famous People. Can you give us some snippets?
Well, yes, there was a long list of people famous people. Sometimes famous people are in powerful positions and they have a lot of enemies who want to do them in. Jeffrey Epstein did not, evidence indicates, did not commit suicide in his cell. He didn't. They claimed that he strangled himself, committed suicide 3 feet off the floor with a bed sheet around his neck. Well, he had broken bones in the lower part of his neck, which is consistent with somebody strangling him, not with a ligature on the side. He was probably murdered by people who wanted to hush him up. We know all about Orgy Island, a lot of famous people, etc. So that's one example. Natalie Wood, a lot of unanswered questions about Natalie Wood. Marilyn Monroe, this one's a shocker, is that, of course, it's an established fact that Robert Kennedy and Peter Lawford and a doctor were at Marilyn Monroe's house the day she died. And then the homicide investigator in Los Angeles who handled the case from the very beginning believed that it was a murder from the get-go. None of the evidence fit together, which is shocking. That would mean that the Kennedys, both Robert Kennedy and John Kennedy, were having an affair with Marilyn Monroe. She's quoted as saying, "You all have treated me like a piece of meat." At one point, she was yelling and screaming a lot, and Robert Kennedy supposedly putting a pillow over her mouth to shut her up. She got to the press and spewed all that she knew about the Kennedys was massively embarrassing. So it is alleged, and seriously alleged, that Marilyn Monroe was murdered by the Kennedys, which, oh my gosh, I mean, how shocking is that? That's in the book. Stalin killed a number of people. The famous ballerina he had poisoned. Other people had poisoned. Putin, of course, with his death squads, had murdered a number of people, his oligarch friends, ex-friends. One of them was escaped the United States. Was at an expensive condominium, a high-rise condominium in Washington, D.C. I guess not too far from the White House. I guess he thought he was safe there with his bodyguards. He gets murdered along with other people. There's also kind of a comical word, dark comedy word called defenestration, which means being flung out of a window. Well, there were at least two of Putin's oligarch friends that for some reason one of them jumped out of a hospital window at 6 stories up, probably didn't jump, probably was pushed. And there was another example of defenestration. So that there's a list of murders there. Also, explain the continuum. We're 99% sure that Jimmy Hoffa was murdered by the mob 2 months before he died. That man who actually committed the mob killer came forward and told the whole story. So that's just near certainty that happened that way. That's the one end of the spectrum. At the other end of the spectrum, you have J. Edgar Hoover, who died suddenly in his bedroom, one killed over and died. The assertion is that someone was able to slip into his house, put poison in his toothpaste, and he was murdered, poisoned in that way. Well, that's a serious possibility. We can't say for certain it happened that way, but as soon as he died, agents went over there and scooped up all of his dossiers they had of so many people. He was buried without a resume. The resume was buried without an autopsy. And so it's a suspicious circumstance. You can't say for certain. You can't say Jimmy Hoffa's certainty, but you can't say by J. Edgar Hoover. And all up and down the line, we go from a 99% certainty to a 35% serious possibility. You have a long list of people. There's also celebrities themselves, famous people, who themselves may have been guilty of murder. Frank Sinatra may have murdered at least, or had at least one person murdered for personal reasons, and there may have been others as well. So it's just a whole treasure trove of these juicy scandals involving major personalities, and that's what that book is about. But now that book is not written. It's not written yet. Although some people have said that's the juiciest of them all, and it does sound very juicy. But now we have 2 books. We have Tiny Blunders, Big Disasters, 39 Tiny Mistakes That Changed the World Forever. It's book number 1, which I'm happy to say has been on the bestseller list at Amazon for 4 years, sold over 30,000 copies. Book 2 is thank you. And book 2 is Tiny Blunders, Big Disasters. Book 2, The Many Tiny Mistakes that changed the world forever. So we got the 2 books. The second book is in pre-sale right now. It's doing very, very well. We sold almost 1,000 copies just in pre-sale. It's getting ready to come out next month. So we have high hopes. The first book's won like 6 awards. We're hoping the second book's going to win a lot of awards too. And there's serious people who think it would make a good TV series, but that's a whole different subject.
And then when is the third book going to be finished and published, do you suppose?
It'll be a year from now. It'll be about a year from now, a year from next spring, not this spring, but next spring, it should be available. And it's, when I mention it to people, it's a very interesting topic. And it just is a treasure trove of all kinds of things that have happened there. So it's going to be fun to write and hopefully very fun to read.
So what's it like to be an author in 2025? Mechanically, how do you approach it? When like your upcoming book, how will you perform the research, and then how will you actually write the book? Do you sit down and write it out by longhand, or you type it on a computer, or you don't use Chat GPT for any of it, do you?
Gosh, no. GPT. Now, by the way, if you read any subject from Encyclopedia Britannica, okay, it comes out as kind of a boilerplate kind of a thing. I suspect that Britannica people may be using ChatGPT. It's kind of a flat, dull, wordy boilerplate kind of writing. I find it very dull. So I flatter myself my writing is much more interesting and full of jolts and surprises and things like that, and quirky little things, and that I hope to think very, very interesting. But no, I don't use ChatGPT at
Well, it
all.
wasn't an accusation. I just have to ask the
Sure.
question, stir the pot a little bit, keep our listeners interested. So,
Sure.
what's the process? Tell us how you do
Yeah,
actually sit down and write.
I make it way back in the 10th grade that they're teaching us how to write. And said the first thing you do, writing an article, whatever it is, you write out an outline. Well, sure enough, that's exactly what I do, and it works very well. If you don't have an outline, you get into the story, and now what do I do next? Do I put this element number third? No, it's best to have an outline, and outline not only for each individual chapter, but an outline for the entire book. And so I start with the outline, then I go to a particular subject, and I tend to go with the one that is most exciting to write at that particular moment. It gives you a lot of momentum. And start writing it following the outline, and it's much better to do it that way because the elements fall together much better. And I find it just a lot of fun to write. My wife gets on me. You do such and such for the house, get away from that 4-foot square world that you're in. So I have to devote a certain amount of time to my wife and keep her happy. That's the highest priority. And also devote so many hours a day towards writing the book. Unfortunately, I have a good time writing and doing the research. And it's fun to share it with people in the spoken word. It's also fun to share it in the written word as well. And I put a lot of twists and turns and kind of novelties into my writing.
So, how many hours a day do you spend on your craft?
It probably only averages out to between 2 and 2.5, maybe 3 hours a day. There's some people that sit down and write 4 or 5 hours a day and can churn out 300 or 400 words a day. Some days I spend like 6, 7 hours, but it's more like only just 2.5 hours. And it takes a good year, almost a year and a half for me to write a book.
Fascinating. Well, those are great stories. And thank you for the history lesson on so many topics that we've talked about today. Jared Knott, he's an author. Tiny Blunders, Big Disasters, 39 Tiny Mistakes That Changed the World Forever, and a certain-to-be blockbuster, Hushed Up Murders of Famous People. Happy New Year, Jared, and thank you for coming on with us today.
If you want to, please go to the website, tinyblundersbigdisasters.com, tinyblundersbigdisasters.com. You have 2.5 free chapters there. You have a fun quiz there, have a portrait gallery, have a book trailer there. It's kind of a fun place to visit. And we have a special running on the book for this week.
Very good. A John Gordon Truth special, as it were. And
Yes,
I will encourage our listeners to do just that. And so give it to us one more time, and we'll put it in their comments for our listeners.
Yes, sir. It's tinyblundersbigdisasters.com. tinyblundersbigdisasters.com. That's my website. You go there and you see you get 2 free chapters. You get the book trailers. You get the portrait gallery and a fun quiz, and it's a kind of a fun place to visit.
Well, thank you again, Jared. I hope you're listening to us on Saturdays from noon to 2 on the John Fredericks Radio Network right there in Atlanta. We're also in Memphis, Nashville, Richmond, Norfolk, Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, and the entire state of West Virginia. We're also on Getter, Rumble, and YouTube Live. And, of course, the CDM Press 13 digital platforms on the World Wide Web. Jared Knott, thank you so much. Happy New Year. And let's welcome in the Golden Age. We didn't talk about that, but
absolutely.
What a difference a day makes.
It certainly does. It's an honor to be here.
Thank you. We'll have you back again soon, I hope.
Thank you.
Welcome back to Tipping Point. I'm your host, Kara McKinney. President Trump isn't the only one waging an all-out war on DEI. Last night, we talked about how some agencies like the ATF are stealth editing their DEI officers' titles in order to try and shield them from firing. Now, Libs of TikTok has an internal video of a top VA Veterans Affairs official during a virtual meeting appearing to explain a similar plan to circumvent the president's policies. Listen.
Our HUD Dash program does have a couple of Dr. Ensley's like DEI type, presentations, trainings, and so forth. So will he still just kind of reshift his focus on what he'll present? It just won't have like a DEI component, but we can still get trainings from him? Yes, absolutely. Yes. He will be, it probably won't be titled DEI, but I think, elements and things of those really apply to all people. So I think that's really, so I think it'll still be available. It just may be reframed. Got it. But he is certainly available for training and such. So.
But like I said before, President Trump can't go at this alone. When it comes to private institutions that the government cannot reach, perhaps no one has been as effective as friend of the show Robbie Starbuck is in going after major companies like Tractor Supply, John Deere, Harley Davidson, Toyota, and Walmart, among others. In addition, Christopher Rufo, the Manhattan Institute, is doing great work on this front when it comes to working behind the scenes on influencing government policy. As just one example, he posted, quote, "The Department of Education has terminated its DEI council, withdrawn its equity action plan, canceled $2.6 million in DEI training contracts, and placed all DEI staffers on leave, effective immediately. They're laying siege to the institution with more to come," end quote. Our friend Luke Rosiak of the Daily Wire also bagged his own scalp after exposing how the Biden-Harris administration tried to skirt federal rules in order to convert their political appointees into regular bureaucrats to burrow into the Trump administration. Burrow is the term Trump's White House used in responding to their reporting by firing Elizabeth Pena from the Labor Department. Rosiak writes Thursday upon news of the firing, quote, "There are strict rules around political appointees converting to career employees to stay in the government after their president's term ends, designed to prevent the subversion of the new administration. Conversions must be approved by the Office of Personnel Management and reported to Congress. But between the election and inauguration day, the Biden Department of Labor skirted that process by creating a 3-year position and appointing Pena to it," the Daily Wire revealed on January 15th. It contended that because it wasn't a permanent position, the rules didn't apply, even though that would place her in the workforce for the majority of Trump's term, end quote. He explains how DEI shaped Pena's time in the Biden-Harris administration and how her work centers on recruiting, hiring, and placing candidates in key positions of power within the federal government. Exactly the wrong type of person President Trump wants for that sort of important role. Joining us now to discuss is John Gordon, the host of the Truth with John Gordon show. John, thanks for being here tonight.
Thank you. It's my pleasure, Kara. Thanks for having me on.
Great. So it's good to see the new Trump administration on the lookout, right, for these sorts of political games.
Isn't it a great day? I mean, we have gotten so tired of the duplicitous lying that we've endured for the last 4 years and the gamesmanship and the underhanded dealings of the federal government that are supposed to govern for us, but clearly we're governing for someone else. And it's just I feel like the weight of the world has been lifted off our collective shoulders now.
It really does feel that way. And I think it speaks a lot to the left as well. Subversion is really how they've operated for so long. And sadly, we've seen the Democrat Party really just fall completely to its far left, to its fringe elements, and just become that and embody that. And for so long, right, the Marxist force, which really underlays a lot of this, it used subversion tactics, right? You put people in certain positions and then they will lie and they'll pretend that they agree with the norms, but secretly they don't. They have their Marxist agenda. They have their tool belt for that, for getting that done. And they just quietly go about it, eroding basically the ground beneath our feet. So, I mean, I think some of these, to borrow again the Trump White House's term, but burrow, to see a lot of these former Biden-Harris administration staffers trying to burrow and worm their way into the Trump administration. I mean, that's just the deep state, right? What they always mocked us for saying. Well, this is just prime example, right, of what the deep state is and how it operates.
100%. And that clip that you just played confirms for me that these people have still not gotten the memo. The American people are tired of the duplicitous games that they play and the underhandedness of trying to get their agenda and get their way, in spite of the fact that 77 million people voted to elect Donald Trump president because they were tired of the Harris-Biden agendas. And so I couldn't be more excited. And yesterday, President Trump signed an executive order releasing all of the Kennedy files, both JFK and RFK, as well as Martin Luther King. That's something that I've been advocating for as long as I can remember. I think what we're going to find out is that the CIA killed Kennedy and possibly Bobby Kennedy. I don't know about Martin Luther King. I have no insight into his assassination beyond what's in the public domain. But we need a cleansing in America. The alphabet agencies, the CIA and the FBI and the other deep state agencies in Washington have had a stranglehold on this country. And there is just no telling how vile and evil their deeds have been. They engage in overthrowing governments and literally murdering people, including a duly elected president of the United States. I want to know the facts surrounding July the 13th in Butler, Pennsylvania. I also want to know, I want to see all the evidence on J6. I want to know who the provocateurs were in the audience. I would like to know who Ray Epps was working for. Let's subpoena his bank records, bring him in and put him under oath and have him tell us what happened. Same thing with Michael Byrd, the officer that killed Ashley Babbitt. I'd like to see who's on the Epstein files. There's a lot of atonement that needs to occur. I've advocated and continue to advocate for a cleansing of America. Put it all out there, get it over and done with in one fell swoop. The American people are tough enough. We can handle it. But the party is over. For those people who are operating in the shadows and outside the laws and the Constitution, your day is up.
And it's because so much of this, right, was an imposition from elites of a belief system that the American people do not believe, and in many ways they reject outright. And so a lot of this DEI stuff, and like you said, a lot of the cover-ups and everything else that's been going on, it's had to be forced onto us. And then when Americans don't like this, then they're made to comply by censorship and by other means. We've seen with Biden's tenure in office, it came with political prisoners as well. And I think in part, that's what they're missing as well. So that VA healthcare lady, as you're mentioning, that we saw in the Libs of TikTok video, and she's talking about their DEI official and changing the name, and he can still give trainings, and it'll be about something different, but he'll bring elements, is what she said, of his DEI work into whatever they're going to be calling it now. They're renaming and reframing. But it's those elements that Americans do not like. They do not like being told that they're either an oppressor or an oppressed person based solely on their skin color. They want to be seen for who they are in their totality as an entire human being, as a human person. They don't want to be seen for these little bits and pieces of themselves. And we're sick of it. We're sick of that. Those are elements no one wants, right? That's what the member of the order coming down from President Trump is saying. It's divisive, it's cruel, it's poison. It tears apart the fabric of this nation. And that's what people don't like. We don't want those elements. We also don't want to sit in training seminars being told to respect someone who's in a throuple or these other weird polycules where there's 4 or 5 different adults all cohabitating together and raising a kid that who knows even who's the parent of the kid. It's bizarre, and we don't want to be told that that's the exact same thing as a mom and a dad married together under God, through God and with God, and raising their children. We don't want this, right? We're sick of it. So those elements, right? And as they rename their DEI groups, they're using equity. So do you think if President Trump and his staffers are looking for those buzzwords, they'll be able to sniff out those DEI types, right, who are trying to change their names and obscure their true aims?
Well, Washington is a big place. The federal government has 3 million employees. And so it is going to take some work. But Doug Collins, the new head of the Veterans Administration, he is a Trump loyalist. I know Doug Collins. He is a fine Christian, committed individual who has served in the military. He is a veteran himself. He's also a former congressman and was the Judiciary Committee, when he was in Congress. And he made that impassioned speech while he was there that many of us remember. He's a great guy. He's a lawyer. He's also an ordained minister, one of the most unique people I know. He's not going to put up with it. I can guarantee you he is at his desk right now, and they are bringing people in to say, all right, tell us who these people are. Tell us who the people are that are left over from the Biden-Harris administration who are going to work in the shadows and try and undermine our government. Round them up and get them out of here. And that's what we see happening. And John Ratcliffe today, I cannot tell you how euphoric I am. He said he is going to open an investigation John Ratcliffe, the new head of the CIA, into the origins of the COVID virus. I mean, we were told that it came from a bat cave. Then we were told that it came from the Wuhan lab and it was released by accident. Was it? I have my doubts. I have my suspicions. I would like to know. Now, we're the most powerful nation on earth. The CIA is a huge machine. I suspect they already know the origins of the COVID virus. I think it's time to let the American people know it. And I think it is going to track straight back to China. They do not value human life like we do. They have committed genocide against their own people. And, there was a doctor at the Wuhan lab who spoke publicly about the coronavirus, and she has not been seen or heard of since. And so that is textbook for how the CCP operates. We need to get it out into the public and let the world condemn them if in fact they are culpable for unleashing this virus that killed millions of people across the world.
Well, John, that's exactly right. Thank you so much for making time for us tonight.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me on.
The Truth with John Gordon.
I woke up on top of the world this morning.
We break down today's political landscape and feature interviews with key guests.
It doesn't matter if they call you a or a
to uncover the real story behind current events in the United States.
Of course, saw a rifle pointing through a fence with a chain link. Okay, so
you're a good man. I just want to give you a compliment because you have courage to stay with the truth.
I hate injustice.
This is great fun. I like you and your ideas. So let's do some more of this.
Steve Bannon picked a fight with the wrong person. He decided to go after Elon Musk because Musk said that he was in favor of the 1HB visa. Here's what Steve Bannon had to say.
So don't think you're going to come back and, oh, you know what? Well, what we need to do is increase it here and cut that cost there. Screw you. Don't come up and go to the pulpit in your first week here and start lecturing people about the way things are going to be. If you're going to do that, we're going to rip your face off. Because you can't beat us. We're not beatable. This army of the awakened is not beatable because we're relentless and we will never surrender and we will never slow down. And yes, if you go low, we'll go to the center of the earth.
So who is we, Mr. Sloppy Steve Bannon? Who is going to rip Elon's face off? You know what it sounds like? It sounds like a spoiled, dejected little kid. Oh, Daddy, pay me some attention. It looks like sibling rivalry. We've already posted about that. So today, Vivek Ramaswamy announces that he is stepping down from co-chairman of DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, because he decided over the weekend to inject himself into the debate of the 1HB visa. And it didn't work well for him. So this is what I suspect without evidence. I mean, the evidence is 2 + 2 probably equals 4, or if it looks like a duck, it quacks like a duck, it's probably a duck. It looks to me that Steve Bannon co-opted Vivek Ramaswamy to enter into the debate on the 1HB visa program, and it did not work. And guess who was not present at any of the inauguration ceremonies that I watched? Steve Bannon. Well, here's what Vivek Ramaswamy said as he was headed out the door.
All right, DOGE co-founder Vivek Ramaswamy will no longer head the department, leaving Elon Musk as the sole chair. Edward Lawrence joins us live from the White House with more. Edward, what's the backstory?
Yeah, so he's stepping away possibly for future endeavors, and I'll get to that in just a second. Elon Musk was spotted here on the White House complex yesterday, and noticeably absent was his Doge duo brother, Vivek Ramaswamy. Now, a Trump transition spokesperson says that Vivek has stepped away from the Department of Government Efficiency because he's possibly going to run for the governor of Ohio. Now, on social media, Vivek says this. He says, quote, it was my honor to help support the creation of Doge. I'm confident that Elon and the team will succeed in streamlining government. I'll have more to say soon about my future plans for Ohio. Last night, when President Trump signed the executive order creating Doge, he was asked about the world's richest person getting an office in the West Wing.
This is an order creating and implementing the Department of Governmental Efficiency, known as Doge.
Okay, that's a big one.
Is Elon Musk going to get a West Wing office?
No, he's getting an office for about 20 people that we're hiring to make sure that these get implemented.
So Doge now is off the ground and started running with those 20 folks that are here on the complex. And we'll have to see what day 2 of the Trump administration has to offer. And I can tell you that the lights are on in the residence right now. They were on when I got here at 5:30. Back to you guys.
There's a lot to unpack in there. I'm sorry, Mr. Bannon. Whose face got ripped off? Well, it looks like you co-opted Vivek Ramaswamy and it cost him his seat at the table, potentially. Of course, everybody's trying to save face and they don't want to trash Ramaswamy on his way out the door. So he has said that he is stepping down because he will probably announce next week that he's running for governor of Ohio. And then I don't know if you caught it, but in the end of that clip, the Fox News reporter said that he arrived at the White House this morning at 5:30 a.m. and the lights were already on. Huh. What a difference a day makes. You know, Joe Biden didn't go to work until 10 in the morning and frequently checked out at 2. Maybe on a long day, he'd stay until 4. Did you watch President Trump on Inauguration Day? He started at 5 a.m. He went to church, then he went to the Capitol where he participated in the inauguration, gave his address. Then he went to another room in the Capitol where he greeted a large number of supporters. Then he went to the convention center where he greeted legions of supporters. I mean, there were thousands of people there. And Elon Musk was speaking. I wonder why Steve Bannon wasn't speaking. Where was Steve Bannon? Whose face got ripped off, Mr. Bannon, or who shot themselves in the kneecap? I think that's probably more accurate. So stand down, Mr. Bannon. Play nice, get nice. Otherwise, you're going to find yourself out in the cold, literally and perhaps figuratively. Well, definitely figuratively. Perhaps literally, I should say. Well, the inauguration was certainly enjoyable to watch. People say that we collectively feel like the weight of the world has been lifted from our shoulders. Well, Donald Trump was clearly the star of the day, but playing a very important supportive role was, of course, the First Lady, who absolutely looked beautiful, elegant, totally appropriately dressed. But don't overlook Baron Trump. He says very little, but just watch this clip of when he went up to now former President Biden. Now, a lot of to-do was made over the fact that while President Trump on Monday night was signing executive orders one after the other in rapid succession, while continuing to answer the press's questions. We've seen more of Trump in the first 2 days than we saw of Biden in the last 6 months, at least since the debate or any period before that. He was like nowhere to be found. And Trump is out there. He's transparent. He's letting us know what he's doing. But while he was answering questions, Peter Doocy asked him if Biden had left him a letter, as is traditional in the changing of the president. It has become a tradition since, I believe it was started by Ronald Reagan, if I'm not mistaken. So President Trump, he said, well, I don't know. Let's look. He opened the drawer and he came out with an envelope addressed to him. He said, let's just open it right now and I'll read it to all of you. And then he said, nah, I better wait and do that later. So he set it aside. Well, we now know what the letter said. It was very polite, very cordial, devoid of any substance. Just said, I wish you well as you assume this important office and wish the country peace, prosperity, and so forth. But what I want to know is, what did Barron Trump say to Joe Biden? That's what I want the answer to. Some people think he said, it's an honor to meet you. Other people think that he said, you're next. I don't know, but I sure would like to know. And what I do know is that Barron Trump, of all the inner circle of Trump world, is reportedly the most upset with the treatment that his father received. So Barron Trump is a star. He's a rising star. People really like him. And we are going to hear a lot about this young man in the days and years to come. For our listeners who watched last week, and our listeners who watched, well, listeners can watch on Rumble, Getter, and YouTube Live. You can also interact with us there. But for our listeners and viewers, you may know that we covered the story of Colton Moore and the treatment that he received by the Speaker of the Georgia House of Representatives and his henchmen, who refused him entry into the Georgia House, onto the Georgia House floor in a joint session of the legislature. Colton Moore would have been attending as a duly elected state senator from Northwest Georgia. Well, we had a deep dive into that last week. We had Colton Moore on the show to talk about it, and I think we got pretty good insight into what happened. This week, I read a rather electrifying article by Bill Simon. Bill authors The Political Vine, a dose of political caffeine with no sugar added. Man, political boxers, David Ralston, Mr. Burns, and Smithers by Bill Simon, January 23rd, 2025. Bill Simon, this article kind of gets down with it. You kind of get down to the nitty gritty here. Welcome to the truth.
Thank you, John. I appreciate the invitation and the introduction to your audience.
Well, so we can recap briefly. David Ralston was the Speaker of the Georgia House of Representatives. It is not alleged, it was proven that he participated in passing a law before he was Speaker that said if your legislative duties interfered with your representation of your client, the court was automatically obliged to provide you a continuance as a counsel in the case, be it civil or criminal. Well, the late David Ralston took full advantage of the law that he wrote and postponed over 1,000 cases, some criminal, some civil, and in the process of doing so, denied the victims justice. So, a year ago, there was a resolution brought to the floor of the Georgia Senate, where Colton Moore serves from Northwest Georgia, and they wanted to name a building for David Ralston. They suspended the rules. They sprung it on the Senate. They didn't give people any notice at all. So Colton Moore went to the well of the Senate, which he is entitled to do as a state senator, and he spoke in opposition to the resolution. He was universally condemned by members of the Senate and the House, leading John Burns, a little short man with a complex, I think, declared that he was no longer welcome on the floor of the Georgia House of Representatives, where he had once served, and that he would not be allowed to enter. Speaker Burns' castle, I guess, because he clearly thinks he's a king. What do you think, Bill? Tell us your take on this. So when Colton Moore went to the House to participate in the joint session, he was blocked by the doorkeeper, and then this lawyer, ostensibly a lawyer, I've been told that they can find where he is not a member of the Georgia bar, but he basically came and body slammed Colton Moore to the floor. Now the citizens of Georgia are universally outraged. All right. Tell us about it, Bill.
That's news. I did not know that Keith Williams was not a lawyer. I was just in the process of looking him up.
Well, he may be a lawyer, but I'm told doesn't show up as a member of the Georgia bar. I mean, you can certainly be a lawyer from another state. You could have gone to law school. I don't think you could practice law without a license unless you wanted to violate the law. But anyway, we digress.
Yeah, that's fine. But no, there's an actual video. I mean, I only saw the video on Twitter right after it happened. There's a very good 2-minute, 40-some-odd second video that's actually linked in my Political Vine article and elsewhere on the web. Well, yeah, the first doorkeeper softly blocked Colton, and Colton was trying to walk to the door and open the door. And when he walked up there, I mean, there was the big doorkeeper, a big guy. There were like 8. I think I counted 8. There may have been more out of range. 8 Georgia State Patrol officers, all decked out in their uniform, ready. I think I learned later, Burns notified them that, there's going to probably be trouble today, so y'all come over here and protect us. So 8 cops were there waiting, but they didn't touch Colton until after the doorkeeper got kind of tired of pushing Colton back and forth. He relented, and the short crew cut Keith Williams guy, he started more physically pushing Colton, and got to a point where he wrapped his arms around him and threw him. Actually, kind of like, I guess he threw him from his right shoulder. He turned to the right and then threw Colton on the floor. Now, Colton is about a 6'5" guy, and he's a very lanky guy. And I bring that up because he doesn't have any cushion in his body. So when he was thrown to the floor, it's a marble floor. It's a hard surface to hit. And Colton went and didn't have time to really break his fall or anything. So, and then he got up, and then the State Patrol start handling Colton more physically and start talking to him, and you got to stop this, whatever. And Colton said, "Look, I got my rights here." He said, "I'm a state senator. Y'all are violating my rights to enter that room, etc." And the Georgia State Patrol has no idea of what the Constitution says, especially the part of the Constitution that says when the House and the Senate is in session, all members are free from essentially harassment or arrest of any kind of misdemeanor. Yet he was arrested on site.
Well, and I think it bears interjection to note that Colton Moore at no time did he ever, and it was intentional on his part, so that they could not say that he provoked them. He never raised his hands above his waist. He kept his arms straight by his side the entire time. Now, clearly, he tried to walk onto the floor, and they blocked him. And then I think you did a very good job of explaining what happened after that. So I have been an observer and involved in Georgia Republican politics really since the age of 7 when I put my first bumper sticker on for Richard Nixon. I was a Republican in Macon, Georgia. Macon was actually one of the few places where there was a vibrant, organized Republican Party. We had 2 members of the state Senate from Macon, Oliver Bateman and Billy Adams. God, Bill, I can't remember what I had for breakfast this morning, and I can remember Oliver Bateman and Billy Adams from how many years ago? 50, I think. I happen to know both of them and like them very much. But Macon had a vibrant Republican Party, but the rest of the state, Republicans they didn't exist. So fast forward, Colton Moore wasn't allowed on the floor. And I guess the point that I was trying to make, in all of my years, I've never seen a worse display of power for power's sake. It was an absolute power play. And, unless you feel that a state senator lacks, for some reason, his freedom of speech, and unless you think for some reason that he should not be allowed to debate a resolution that is brought before the state Senate, please help me understand what rule, law, or whatever other adjective or descriptor you'd like to use that he violated.
There's a podcast. It's a weekly podcast I listen to. I don't want to give them any notoriety to help a guy named Scott Turner, who's a former state legislator, who is a veritable suck-up to the House leadership and the concept of the legislature and all that. So he pointed out in his podcast, well, there was the widow of David Ralston was there. And she was there to listen to this honor process and whatever. And I'm thinking to myself, well, Colton Moore didn't know that. Colton Moore probably didn't care about that either, unfortunately. This was a legal matter. This was not a personal matter. And so he had every right to object.
I think you could carry it a step further and say that he had every obligation to object. He was representing the 200,000 people that live in that district, and he was duly elected and sent there to represent their interest. And I'll just tell you, I haven't seen any polls. I don't know factually. David Ralston was very well liked in the state legislature. He was not so well liked outside of the Georgia Capitol. He was viewed as a demagogue and someone who did not play fairly and by the rules, as the Atlanta Journal-Constitution wrote. I can't remember how long ago it's been, but it was before he passed away, but 3 or 4 years ago anyway.
Correct. I'm in agreement with that. The trouble is the concentration of people that were knowledgeable enough about Ralston. They did not live in the state house district that he was elected from. So those people, for want of a better opportunity to vote for someone else, and there were people that challenged Ralston, but the whole apparatus of Ralston's political aura, A-U-R-A, came into play like when Coach Sam Snyder challenged him back in like 2014 or so. The House and people like Chuck Upstation, who is now the majority leader, they put out ads in the paper and just insulting essentially Snyder's candidacy in life. I mean, they're just, I think they're kind of like the what was used to be described in Arkansas when the Clintons ran that as a governor. It was a blood sport without the blood, but it was brutal type of campaigning. So no challenge to the king, Ralston. No challenge here, except I will tell you this. about 20 minutes ago, I saw State Rep Charlize Byrd post a copy of a letter that she hand delivered to the Speaker's office today, I think, demanding that he fire this guy, Keith Williams.
Well, I want the legislature to fire John Burns. He has lost the moral authority to lead, in my opinion. He has invoked his own bias, his own camaraderie with a former, now deceased legislator, and imposed that on both bodies of the Georgia legislature instead of relying on the Constitution and the law and just doing the right thing, honoring the First Amendment for starters. Let's start there. Why does Colton Moore lose his right to free speech just because John Burns doesn't like what he has to say? Now, you can talk about the propriety of speaking ill about the departed. I understand that. You can talk about the decorum of speaking ill about someone's spouse who is in the gallery, but then they should not have ramrodded this thing through. They sprung it on everybody. They did not follow a normal process. They brought it to the floor of the Senate. They've suspended the rules. Colton Moore was the only senator who voted against suspending the rules, allowing this resolution to come to the floor without going through the normal process, where it would be passed upon by the Rules Committee and put on a docket, be put on the agenda so people would know what was coming. But they just tried to sneak it in at the 11th hour. So it was just, in my estimation, it was wrong on every level. And, they shoulder the blame for inviting Speaker Ralston's wife and family to be in the gallery under the assumption that their trickery was going to work. Little did they know that there was one lone senator who had the guts to stand up and speak for the people of Georgia, who really, given a vote by the electorate, I don't think that a vote by the electorate would have passed to honor David Ralston. Now, I never met the man. I don't have an axe to grind. I'm sure that he had many, many redeeming values. But what he did with this law that he created, that he then proceeded to abuse, is personally offensive to me because, like I said at the top, it deprived the victims of justice. And these were not shoplifting and petty crimes. He was defending robbers, murderers, and rapists. And the victims did not get justice. I'm sorry, Bill, what did you say?
Child molesters, actually. That was a frequent...
even worse. Well, so you've got some pretty serious guts. You wrote a pretty pointed editorial in the Political Vine. Have you gotten any blowback from it? What kind of response have you gotten?
I sent it out to 5,700 subscribers, and I got, I think, 14 total unsubscribes. That's usually what people do. I used to get a couple of emails back telling me to, not with this one, but anything I write, a bunch of negative ones. But this time, all feedback was positive in email, and a few people unsubscribed because that's what they do. But yeah, no blowback. I heard from a lot of people I haven't heard from in 5 or 10 years who I was surprised to even see they were still reading, and they said, kudos, Bill. Let's keep on going. So I'm keeping on going.
Well, I thought that what you wrote was extremely well written. I enjoy writing. I do write a lot. I write for this show. I've always enjoyed writing, but it is a discipline, and that's where I get off the track because, I'm also impatient by nature to a fault. And this article, how many words was it? Pretty long.
I don't know.
Well, you
Pretty long.
got to use that tool. I'm working, folks, to bring Bill Simon into the 21st century here. He's got a flip phone. He doesn't do Zoom, and he won't go on camera because he's technology challenged. So I'm trying to work with him here and help him through this. But that Microsoft Word has a tool. You just click on it. It'll tell you exactly how many words your article is. But it's a long article, and it's very well written, and it's well developed, and even goes back and tells a piece of Georgia history in the process. So while I am largely kidding you about your technology deficiencies, I am giving you a backhanded compliment because it is a truly. Did you write that on a legal pad with a pencil and an eraser?
Off that skill. Off that skill. 1990s brought technology to me in typing.
Yes, same here. All my buddies were taking typing in high school. I was like, I don't even want to go close to one of those things. But then I found myself working at Lanier Business Products in 83. And we had the largest installed base of programmable word processors in America. And now all the millennials listening just turned off the radio because they don't know what a word processor is. But anyway, it's a very well developed article, but you do not mince words, and you get pretty pointed in there. I actually was born in the North. My dad was a Yankee, so I grew up being accustomed to directness. I kind of liked it.
Oh, good. I'm glad you're that. I'm glad you didn't get too offended with some cleverly masked words.
No, offended would not be an adjective that I would use at all. I thought it showed courage that you were willing to speak the truth. And since that's the name of our program, that's what we really care about. Before we let you go, Bill, you did write an article that I also saw about voter GA and Garland Favorito. And I did finish that article being left a little bit in doubt as to what your point was. I know Garland. I like Garland, and I really admire the work that he has done. He has been on the voter integrity challenge and mission since 2014, long before 2020 and long before we even talked about voter integrity, really. And so I struggled to read between the words to find out what your beef with Garland really is, other than he's not a Republican. Do you have to be a Republican to care about voter integrity?
No, but I'm trying to remember. Just fill in more blanks for you. He was actually opposing the electronic machines when they came out, when Secretary of State Kathy with a C, Democrat, in 2002 came out with the first touchscreen voting things. He was out there opposing that. So he's actually got a history going both Republican and Democrat in opposition of the electronic voting entirely.
But how is that a partisan issue? I mean, the fact that Kathy Cox was a Democrat, but shouldn't we celebrate the fact that Garland was a prophet and telling us way in advance that these machines were very suspect and could not be relied on, and even the president of the United States favors going to paper ballots. So I'm not trying to be contentious with you, and I'm not on a mission. I just read that before we came on, and it's curious to me, and I ask out of pure intellectual curiosity.
Okay, and I'm not partisan. I will explain. This state used to have paper ballots, fill in paper ballots, and so there is a major honesty problem because most of these state boards of elections are run, and this is partisan, perhaps. I'm sorry, but these are facts. State has been run by Democrats forever. It doesn't really matter sometimes who runs the big constitutional officers. So each of these county boards of elections are run by lots of Democrats. So Democrats, for lots of years, Lester Maddox years, you go back to, there's the guy, I forgot the first guy's name for Callaway.
Bo Callaway.
Bo Callaway, okay? Bo Callaway lost his governorship because because Lester Maddox, they were in these precincts, and these Democrat-governed precincts, and all around South Georgia, whatever, stuffing the ballot with paper ballots. Because there were no such thing back then as poll watchers. But even today, we have poll watchers, but there are not enough people who would be able to go to each precinct. Not enough Republican voters who will go to the precincts and watch the vote and watch the tabulation and watch for stuffing. There are not enough people. That's why I continue to be opposed to paper fill out the ballot.
Well, I have my own doubts too. Landslide Lyndon Johnson was known to have won his Senate race in Texas because they stuffed all the ballot boxes. So I don't know that there is a silver bullet, and I don't know that the paper ballot is a panacea by any means. How are you going to count 77 million paper ballots cast for Donald Trump? You can feed them through a tabulator, but we know that that's fraught with potential devilment if someone is determined to do it. So what is the best practice for conducting and counting for an election?
Right now, because we have multiple races on each ballot, which would have to all be tabulated, and we have also issues like constitutional questions. Those would all have to be hand counted, and I think you'd be going on weeks at a time to hand tabulate those ballots. It would be several weeks to a month, several months to find out the results. I mean, right now we have new rules, new laws that were passed in 2021 that put a big crimp on the Democrat machine in this state from being able to cheat. Notice what happened. They got the absentee ballots counted for by 8 p.m. on election night. That was a big change. So they didn't have time or opportunity in November 2024 general election to do their mischief that they had in 2020.
Well, I definitely think that is a big part of it. And Senate Bill 222, I think, or was it 202, that cost us the Major League Baseball game. So they didn't like the Georgia Senate trying to stop election fraud, and so they moved the baseball game to Denver, which have more restrictive election laws than Georgia does. The whole thing is just mind-boggling, and it makes you crazy when you think about politics. And it's more about optics than rational thought and reason sometimes. But I want honest, free, fair elections. I don't care. I'm willing to put my faith in the process. And, I probably have been on as many, if not more, losing campaigns than I have been winning campaigns. And I always accepted the results and said, well, we'll get them next time. And I think that's what a democracy is about. I think you've got to be willing to accept your wins, but also take the losses. But I am not willing to accept a stacked deck and a rigged election, which I know happened in 2020 in Georgia. I worked for 2.5 years on the legal case involving the Fulton Board of Elections. I've seen the evidence. I've watched the videos. I've seen the tabulations of 3,200 duplicate ballots on the Secretary of State's own website that even a 2-year-old could figure out was a duplicate. And it just goes on and on. 40,000 illegal votes in Fulton County, 400,000 in the state, according to both David Cross and Joe Rossi, numbers guys who have devoted huge numbers of hours, days, weeks, and months since 2020 looking at the results, and both independently, didn't even know each other, came up with miraculously the same conclusions, 40,000, 400,000. And so then you've got somebody like Rudy Giuliani who was trying to represent his client and present the evidence and the information that, as he knew it at the time before the Georgia State Senate and the William Liggins committee that he called to look into the 2020 election. The next thing you know, they have ruined Rudy Giuliani, America's mayor, the guy who led us through 9/11, the guy who looked the mob in the eyes and defeated them in New York, the guy who cleaned up Times Square and reduced crime by an order of magnitude. Our gratitude has been to take his property, strip him of his law license, injure his reputation. And I'm not over it, and I'll never get over it until we get justice. Not that I want to relitigate 2020. The ship has sailed. I just don't want it to ever happen again. But there has got to be a better way. I think, Bill, if I were king for a day, I would convene the most knowledgeable, trustworthy IT professionals in the country, and I would have them hire people that are honest to devise a system that is as bulletproof as you can get it, that has to go through real certification and move into the 21st century to conduct elections. I'm like you. I just don't see. I mean, Trump got 77 million. Harris got, I believe, 73 million, 74 million. I mean, that's 150 million votes spread out over 50 states. How in the world are you going to count those ballots and have any confidence in the results? There's got to be a better way. But Judge Totenberg in Raffensperger v. the United States of America. No, what was the style of the case? Curling. That's right. Thank you. Curling versus Raffensperger. Judge Totenberg in 2020, in about October or September of 2020, ruled from the bench of the United States District Court that the machines were flagrantly not reliable, but there was insufficient time to do anything about it. Here we sit in 2025, 5 years later, we're still using the same damn machines, and we've got the Haldeman report, and something's got to give. Somebody with a conscience and the desire to get it right has got to come forward and straighten this mess out.
I thought that someone had the idea one time. Number one, I disagree with the Haldeman report. I got a big, long article on Political Vine about that. But all that aside, someone suggested that blockchain is the way to write an election program. You vote on the blockchain where everyone has a secure key code that can't be duplicated. But I don't know how. I know nothing about crypto, but that's what's been suggested.
Well, I own crypto, and I still don't know anything about it. I just bought it to appease my son, who wouldn't quit talking about it until I threw some money at it. He was right. It turned out to be good. But I have the vaguest of understanding of how that works. But I think what you're saying makes sense. The technology exists. We just need to get serious about it. And, when a Democrat wins, Republicans want election reform. And when a Republican wins, Democrats want election reform. We just need to all go to neutral corners and say, look, guys, let's join hands. Let's agree that the Constitution has survived since 1776 in this great country. Let's give it the meaning and the substance that it deserves. And we can join hands and agree that we're going to have honest, free, fair elections. Everybody wins in the long run, and we can get back to a competition for ideas.
Very good.
Thank you, Bill Simon,
forward to that.
Publisher of Political Vine. How do people find you? How do they subscribe? It's an expensive newsletter.
Politicalvine.com is the website, and there's a sign-up thing on the left-hand side under the word info, and it's a free subscription. So.
Yeah. It's remarkable that you spend all this time and effort and you put out great content and you don't charge a penny for it. So I was being facetious when I said it's really expensive. It's not. It's free. And whether you agree or disagree, it's very good, thought-provoking stuff.
It'll mess with your mind. Thank you, John.
Bill Simon, thank you. Let the golden age come in. Let's have some fun in this country now.
All right. I appreciate the push.
Thank you. Happy New Year, and thanks for joining us.
You're welcome. Thanks. All right. Bye-bye.
You're listening to The Truth. I'm John Gordon. We come to you every Saturday on the John Fredericks Media Network in Memphis, Atlanta, Nashville, Richmond, Norfolk, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, and Morgantown, West Virginia, covering the entire state of West Virginia. You can also catch us on CDM Press. That is the Georgia-based media outlet that has 13 digital outlets all over the world. We share the same values. They want the truth. We want the truth. You can also watch us live on YouTube Live, Getter Live, and Rumble.com. Just search for John Gordon Truth. We are right there, and come and join us. And if you like what you hear, please hit the subscribe button and the like button. It really helps. We are inching up towards 1,000 subscribers. And for those of you who are not versed in YouTube, just like I have not really been knowledgeable of how the algorithm works, you don't count until you get 1,000 subscribers. Then the algorithm will start to recognize you and push you out. So our subscribers are going up every week. The hours watched go up every week, and the video that we put up last week on Colton Moore was our best video to date. So thank you for coming and listening and watching. We really appreciate you, and glad that you come and join us.